Hello everyone and welcome back to Anti-Life Reviews and what is my glorious return. That is, if you don't listen to my Micaiah World Reviews show. For those who don't, I'll tell you where I've been briefly. I won't bog you down any more than I have to. I was very seriously ill and I am still fairly ill, but I'm hopefully, I'm on the mend. I seem to be, but it's a long road. So I was literally unable to talk for about a month, which means I couldn't record, obviously. So I am sorry as I was doing pretty good there with getting content out, but I'm sure you won't begrudge me a little time not to die. Now you may also notice all of my videos except for the ones from 2022 are gone. Why? Well, they aren't deleted, just privated, as I felt they were awful. And most people seem to agree. I am still improving. I'm still working towards letting my voice and personality shine through. But I think I found my format not to be any more long-winded, though. So this month, Halloween month, the only real holiday that I celebrate besides Guy Fawkes Day, I'm going to be taking a look at the first 20 Bart Simpsons Treehouse of Horror comics, published by Boingo Comics. I'll be starting with the first 5 this week, which were published in various times between 1995 and 1999. Now, at the end of this month, October 31st, Halloween itself, I'll be ranking all of the stories from each of these comics from worst to best, so that'll be fun. Don't forget to check out my Micaiah World Reviews, where I'll be looking at the first 20 Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episodes. So, yeah. But enough bullshit. Hit subscribe. Do it right now. Go ahead and hit like to get that out of the way. And let's get into it. Obviously, we're going to start off with issue 1. And story number 1, Little Shop of Homers by Mike Allred, who is known from Madman. Not the TV show, the comic book. Lisa is conducting an experiment on a plant of hers. She combines it with some human DNA, that is, her father's toenails, to see the reaction. Well, it dies. So Bart takes it since it smells bad, and he's going to pull some pranks with it. Well, it turns out the plant isn't dead. It also loves human food and is slowly taking on the likeness and hunger of Homer Simpson. It goes mad, and they're forced to burn down the Quickie Mart to get rid of it while Homer and the police eat donuts. This was a good first opening story. It was quick-paced, made some sense, and had a nice tone. There were some issues I had with it, mostly being there's a whole throwaway thing about Bart having X-ray specs. I don't know why. And I was also very disappointed they didn't let Mike Allred do the penciling, as I absolutely love his art. They just let him do the coloring, which isn't the same. I know they want to keep the Simpsons house style, but he would have really brought something special here. Story number 2, Call Me Homer, by Jeff Smith, who is well known for Bone. The family and Grandpa are going through the attic, and Lisa finds a collection of old Simpsons memorabilia of heroic men in the family. Grandpa says he can tell them about another Simpson, a Homer who worked on the high seas, developed a taste for whale blubber, and got his whole ship lost in the Bermuda Triangle. Bart finds an old spear and begins having dreams of whales in his bed. He then chases his whale, Homer, with the spear. This one has a shockingly tight narrative, which I should expect from Jeff Smith. It was fairly entertaining, and it flowed nicely. Grandpa obviously made up the story, which kept changing as he went on. It was kind of funny. And there were some obvious Moby Dick references. It was a nice little story, ended on a comedic note. And story number 3, Bart People by James Robinson, most well known for Starman. Lisa returns from a jazz workshop to find Bart is a little off, wanting to spend more time with his sister. It isn't too long after we find out Bart is a cat person. He eventually transforms back after killing Willie, but the damage is done. He admits all of this to Lisa, but ultimately Bart can't control himself and turns back into the cat person again. He is put in the zoo for safekeeping, and it's revealed Lisa and Maggie are also cat people. Not a very good story. Messy, convoluted, and frankly not very interesting. James is trying to write something far more substantial here than it called for, and he just did not make it on this one. Sorry, the weakest story thus far. And we move right along to issue 2. Story number 1, Slideshow Blob by Paul Dini, most well known for Batman the Animated Series. Sideshow Bob is in prison, obviously, and he isn't feeling so well. So in comes Dr. Nick Riviera to inject him with some Herbert West-ish green liquid. Well, this turns Bob very painfully into a blob-like beast. He then goes on an absolute tear across town, killing many of the Springfield residents before meeting up with a horrified Bart at the Quickie Mart. But he is sucked into the squishy machine and it defeats Bob. But did they really? As we see him escape to the sewer and to Mount Splashmore. A wonderful story by a man who really understands his craft, and Paul Dini. Now, Paul, is he a great comic writer? No, but he is an absurdly consistent one. He understands how to craft a nice story, and he did that here. There are plenty of great comic writers who are inconsistent or lazy, looking at you, Grant Morrison and Warren Ellis. So a guy like Dini is more than welcome here on these little snippets. And he seems to have a good mind for The Simpsons, as we get callbacks to the show and things like Mount Splashmore, as well as the comics, as we see part of the plant, like the plant Homer from Little Shop of Homer in the last issue here. His panel layout and narrative is well done, and we get some cinematic death scenes that I really liked. Top-notch stuff here. Story number 2, Exorcister, by Peter Bagge, who did hate the comic. Media has run amok in The Simpsons, doubly so in the mind of Lisa Simpson, who becomes corrupted by Madonna. So they call Reverend Lovejoy to fix her. We get a brief exorcist moment before it suddenly ends, and the Madonna ghost has gotten into Reverend Lovejoy. I did not enjoy this. It was a far cry narratively, creatively, and stylistically from the last one. It did some strange preaching that I think was supposed to be sarcastic. Then it wrapped up with a parody that it should have been about to begin with. It should have been an Exorcist parody, but it really wasn't. It was like 2 pages. And Madonna, who gives a shit about Madonna? Issue number 3. Now this issue only has one story in it. The Immigration of the Body Snatchers by Evan Dorkin, most well known for Milk and Cheese. Homer is put into an insane asylum. Why? Well, we find out through, as Homer puts it, a dramatic flashback sequence, where we find the town of Springfield acting strangely. People are dead-eyed and shuffling. Barney calls Homer for help, and they find a pod in his garden, which Barney snacks on. Eventually, Barney is turned, and the pod people try to convince Homer to turn with them. Because of his love of professional wrestling, he flees. He tries to save his family, but even they are turned. In the end, he is put into the asylum, where it is revealed the Martians, the Venusians, some robot ghosts, the pod people, and the zombies are all duking it out for control of Springfield. This was quite a nice retelling of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, with some good humor, some wackiness I expected from Evan. Takes up a whole issue, but felt like a really breezy story. I enjoyed the twists and turns this one had, with Barney eating part of his pod, and when he gets changed, the pod, like monster, has bite marks missing out of him. I liked that little narrative. Homer loving pro wrestling is something I liked. There is a part where he is fleeing and meets a guy who is fleeing from zombies, and they wish each other well, and that comes back around at the end. It's nice. It's all around a good issue, a solid issue. There's also a backup about the kids making Homer thinking the TV is demonically possessed. Issue number 4. Story number 1, I Faced Tannenbaum, The Christmas Tree from Another World by Chuck Dixon, most well known from his runs on The Punisher. This is a tepid story about an uninspired-looking evil tree that wants to take over the world. Homer ends up stopping the tree and its invasion thanks to water on an overworked socket. But chocolate bunnies and chicks are coming. Okay. This was bad, genuinely. Had some good moments. We get a cameo from Mulder and Scully, in which Mulder mentions this sounding like a story from Marvel's Tales to Astonish. The issue in question that they're referring to is issue 13 of the aforementioned series. The story is called The Monster from Planet X, which is a tree. The tree's name you might know is Groot, and the art was done by Jack Kirby. That's the most interesting thing about the story. A slight reference that I gave you, more than they did. Story number 2, The Illustrative Man by Batten Lash, who did Archie Meets the Punisher. Lots of Punisher stuff, this one. The kids meet a tattooed man at a freak show who proceeds to tell them stories based on his tattoos. Number 1, The Reluctant Corpse. Patty and Selma hit on a zombie who finds out there are worse things than death. Number 2, The Beast with 4 Fingers. The arm of Herman, the military antique guy who you may recall, is crazed and causing harm all over Springfield. It is still free to this day. And number 3, Basketball, B-A-W-L. Milhouse and Bart think Willie has 2 heads and is hiding one under a basket on his shoulder. In the end, it's revealed Seymour Skinner is the one with 2 heads. This was fun. It's hard to rate these things because they are so short and the overall story was essentially just these minor stories. But it was fine enough, interesting concept that I'm not sure they totally capitalized on, to be honest with you. And the final one for this week, issue number 5. Story number 1, Dark Lisa by Jill Thompson from The Sandman. Lisa is being bullied. There are lots of reasons why. Ultimately, it's Lisa. She's annoying. They end up pouring chili on her, Carrie style, because she's a vegetarian. This, for some reason, gives her Jean Grey as Phoenix-style powers, and she wrecks everyone's shit. She is then taken away as Mr. Burns cosplaying as Professor X, hooked up to a machine to power the town for cheap. This was alright, a little messy narrative-wise with lots of padding, but it was good to see Jessica Lovejoy again as a sort of main antagonist, as well as the art has improved, and I don't mean the art was bad before. I think the production of the art has improved, like they are using higher quality everything, and it shows here. The ending with kind of a nice horror twist that I appreciate, but ultimately this was just an okay story. Story number 2, Extapo Lapo Kettles Day by Sergio Aragonés, who did Gru the Wanderer. I generally did my best to pronounce the name right. I looked at it a few times. I have it written out phonetically, really trying to improve on my names and stuff like that. Bart has designed 3 ghost costumes so you can quickly hit houses while trick-or-treating, not once, not twice, but thrice, and it's very much nice. Meanwhile, South Americans flood The Simpsons because of the aforementioned Olmec head, whose name I'm not saying again. Marge is more than happy to let them have their Festival of the Dead in the basement, and there's lots of foodly offerings. Bart's trick goes off without a hitch, but something else happens. Zombies. Why? Well, Homer ate all the offerings, of course, but thanks to Apu, the Simpson family gets things right on track with the dead. Or do they? I love Sergio's art. It's so fun. It's so, warm and exciting. And he has this incredible amount going on in every panel. He can draw 100 people and you'll notice something about all of them. His splash pages are amazing. When the zombies overrun the town, mwah. If you aren't familiar with him, you can see from the video his style, but really look him up yourself, as my videos are unironically meant to really just be listened to. Story was fun. It went away I didn't totally expect, which was nice. And the Bart subplot didn't really amount to anything, but I like the usage of him trying to get one over. It was nice. A really good story with art to match. Yeah. And story number 3, last story of the week. Apu on Rigel 7 by Doug Ten-Napel, who's most well known for Earthworm Jim. Mr. Burns has a teleporter he got from the Russians, but it doesn't work as it had been mixed up with Apu's Quickie Mart CCTV camera controllers, and Apu is teleported into the deep reaches of space to Rigel 7, where he lands on Kodos, killing her. And as consolation, he helps Kang destroy the evil Rigelian Emperor. Kang then fixes the teleporter, and they remain space friends forever. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, Doug Ten-Napel. Now, there's a lot of controversy over things he said, and let me say this right now. I have talked about people like Klaus Kinski who have done horrible things. And while I may not agree with Mr. Ten-Napel on things he said, I refuse to lump him with people who actually did bad things because of some words he said. He didn't actually hurt anyone except for their feelings, and like I said, I don't agree with him, but I can't in all good faith dismiss him like I've done with others who've committed far, far worse acts. Politics play an important part in comics as well as storytelling, but not really in a Simpsons horror comic, so we can save that debate for another day. That being said, the art is beautiful. He is clearly a very talented man with such a unique style. I love his Rigel 7. His Rigelians look wonderful. The backgrounds were monstrously simple. I like the usage of Apu here. It was sort of unexpected that he would get such a big role, but it was nice. It was a pretty fun story. I also like to point out, I love and Kang and Kodos were for Rigel. Now, originally it was Rigel 3, I believe. They mentioned that in the first Simpsons Treehouse of Horror episode, but then it turns out they were from somewhere else later. I hated the change. I really miss when they were Rigelians. All right, let's go over the issues themselves, and then we'll wrap everything up. Starting with issue 1. I always try to be soft on opening gambits because they are not sure what they want to be, what tone, etc. But they hired 3 substantial comic book writers for this one, which I think was smart and something they will do on and off coming up to mix results. It's a pretty solid issue. None of these people really have a background in any kind of comedy. All of them have a more serious tone to their work, and it kind of shows. Jess Smith's was the funniest out of the 3 and probably the one I liked the most. The Cat People one was exceptionally poor and bogged down the whole quality of the issue. To issue 2, boy, a tale of two stories on this one. The Paul Dini story is the best story yet, while I think the Madonna one is probably the worst one. A literal 50-50 split, and I'm sad to hear that. The extra pages were most welcome for the Dini story, as he needed it to craft a solid narrative, give us some really nice character deaths, while the other felt bloated, drawn out, and stupid. I'm not sure if these or the first 2 episodes of Treehouse were more polarizing. I don't know. To number 3, it's just a single story. I don't think I can say too much more that I didn't already say above. Evan is a very fun writer who can do heartfelt way down to dark and just unusual. Here he really seemed to not only understand good horror storytelling, but his use of The Simpsons, Homer namely, was perfectly done. Another consistent comic writer knocking this one out of the park. Issue 4, overall, this one came out to be a pretty weak issue. One story was bad, and the other one was at best okay. A fairly disappointing entry, but I feel like, unlike the show, there'll be a lot more ups and downs with this because of the non-reoccurring writers. The style and the nature of comic book anthology storytelling is more complicated. I've said it before, and I'm sure I will say it many more times. Comic humor is difficult and can often come off as trying too hard. So yeah, I try to keep that in mind, but this was a failure, essentially. Number 5, now easily the best issue, along with 5 being the best Treehouse of Horror episode. Much about number 5, with some of the best artists they could find in Doug and Sergio. This issue just clicked essentially on all fronts. Dark Lisa was the weakest, but I think I would rate that higher than a lot of other stuff today. But I guess you will have to wait and see in the totality of my rankings. But yeah, I don't know how much more I can praise this. Thus far, this is easily the standout issue, especially because they let the artists take their own inspirations on The Simpsons. While before they were kind of boxing them in with the house style, which I understand, but it's far more exciting seeing people's take on these characters than the usual nonsense we've seen for, 30 plus years. Overall, this was an interesting experiment and a lot different than the episodes I also am reviewing. My other show, Mackay World Reviews, there's a lot more going on here. I believe I mentioned before, because we are not getting writing teams that change. We're getting different writers on each and every single story, essentially. And that has given us far more variety, which is kind of exciting. The comic videos I do are about half as popular as my film and TV review ones, which aren't popular anyways. But I think looking at these, this might be the more interesting overall than the episodes because of the diversity, but I guess we will see. Either way, thank you all so much. I hope you enjoy your Halloween month of October, and I hope you genuinely come back next week, either for this or my Treehouse episode reviews. I appreciate all of you out there. Also, don't forget to add me on Instagram under Demon Peaks for daily Twin Peaks memes. Head over to my Patreon where you can support this channel for as little as $1, 99 cents plus a cent. And don't forget to subscribe. This has been the Tony Makaya, Master of Minds and of Men, and goodbye.